Hi, everybody. This is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your sun and rising sign horoscopes for the month of October 2019. So this month, I'm shaking things up a little bit, and I'm going to do things in groupings of signs according to element. So I'm going to start with the fire signs, and we're going to look at the month ahead for Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius in this video. All right, so let's go ahead and start with Aries, our first fire sign, cardinal fire sign. And what we're going to do is there's two major sets of transits that are passing through this month. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight which houses they're falling in for you and what you can expect. So, for example, this month for those of you born with Aries sun or Aries rising, majority of the focus is coming through after a new moon in your seventh house of love and relationships. This month, you're going to see a bunch of transits coming through the seventh house in Libra, making squares to Saturn and Pluto, which is not currently visible. Let me put that in here. Both Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn in your 10th house. So you've got a bunch of Libra to Capricorn aspects taking place this month. So we're going to talk about those. The other series of aspects that you have this month that are major include a bunch of planetary transits through Scorpio in your 8th house, opposing Uranus and Taurus in your 2nd house. So including a new moon at the very end of the month, like 26th, 27th of October, you get a new moon coming through that will be actually opposing Uranus from the 8th house in Scorpio. So I will go through the major dates for each of these, but I'm going to talk about them as a group. So first of all, the major dates for the Libra Capricorn transits that you have this month, around the 7th, third of the month, you got Mars popping into Libra. Around the 7th, you've got the Sun squaring Saturn in Libra. Around the middle of the month, right around the full moon, like the 12th through the 15th, right in there, you've got the Sun squaring Pluto from Libra to Capricorn. And then at the end of the month, like the last 5-6 days of the month, you got Mars in Libra going through a square to Saturn in Capricorn. So there's just a bunch of transits. And the simplest way to read it when you've got that much going on in a month is to keep it topical, meaning look at the topics being activated between the 7th and 10th houses. And what are those topics for you? That's the area of intimate relationships or anything that you are fully immersed in that's other than yourself. And then the 10th house, which is a place of praxis, meaning action or practice, what you're doing with your life, literally, what do you do most of the time? Or potentially could look at it as a place of career. So with a bunch of planets in Libra in the 7th, squaring Saturn and Pluto and Capricorn in the 10th, you might be facing a crossroads this month in both your intimate or personal relationships as well as the workplace. It could be a time where you're making a career decision or a career change or a big life choice based on something that's taking place in a relationship, getting together with someone, moving to be closer with someone, moving in with someone, breaking up with someone, different kinds of business or creative partnerships that are trying to be maybe forming right now. And again, this is from the start of the month all the way through the end. These transits are just one after another from the 7th to the 10th. So those two areas really powerful for you right now. And also maybe a change in terms of who or what you want to give your time and energy to, both professionally and personally in your relationships. So watch for that. Now, the second major theme of the month are many planets passing through the opposition from Scorpio to Uranus and Taurus in your 2nd house, 8th house, 2nd house axis. So that includes an opposition from Mercury to Uranus in the first week or so of October, followed by Venus in opposition to Uranus, followed at the end of the month, and that's more like mid-month with Venus. And then the Sun eventually opposed to Uranus by the end of the month with a new moon in Scorpio opposing Uranus and Taurus at the end of the month. So again, all month long, you can spread it out over the whole month. And what that does is it keeps the same topical dynamics active all month. And the particulars of the planets don't matter as much. It's not that they're unimportant. It's just that because there's so many rapid dynamics that are changing, the thing that stays the most constant, that's the most predictable, is going to be the house topic. So in this case, for you as Aries, we have the relationship zone and the work zone, right? But the 8th house, 2nd house suggests that There might also be an emphasis on money, finances, or resources in relationships. That means issues around your partner's wealth or job or money, bills, debts, things that you owe other people, as well as the general theme of emotional entanglement with others. Debts that we owe people emotionally or karmically could be quite complicated this month. And with the opposition to Uranus in the second house, you're also thinking of the need to break free, second house, in relation to finances, material resources, income, and expenditures. So it's a very financial placement. Uranus in the second house provoking the need for greater independence, and sometimes more of an emphasis on self-reliance. But you have an axis going right now that has a lot to do with the difference between self-reliance and codependency or cooperation. And that has to do with the transactional nature of relationships. So that's really featured all month long as well. Okay, so now that we have those dates in mind, let's switch over and take a look at Leos, our next fire sign. So for Leos, where are these dynamics taking place? Well, the Libra-Capricorn axis is going to be taking place between your third and sixth houses, and the Scorpio-Taurus dynamic is taking place across the 4th and 10th house axis. So what does that give us? What does that provide us with? Well, let's start with the Libra Capricorn axis. The new moon in Libra, of course, in your 3rd house, if you're a Leo sun or Leo rising, is a big deal right now. How does that play out? Well, the 3rd house is a house that has a lot to do with what occupies our mind within the immediate environment. It's your neighborhood, it's your siblings, it's people who are like brothers or sisters to you. It's things that are related to a common source or a common root, traveling to see family, or your mind being preoccupied with duties or obligations in your immediate environment or within your family or neighborhood or village or even city. It's also a house that's very mental and intellectual. It's the joy of the moon, and the moon in Indian astrology is the planet that is primary responsibility of the moon is to signify the mind. And so the moon mind, it's really not just intellectual. It's not like your thoughts. It's what your heart is dwelling on, right? That's what the moon has to do with. So when you see a bunch of planets, a new moon in Libra passing through the 3rd house, Venus ruled, Venus is in her home sign right now. What is on your mind is going to be those relationships and bonds that are close to you, or transactional things in relationships. For example, Mercury with Venus is about, what am I giving you? What are you giving me? What can I share with you? What can you share with me? What can I know from you? And what can you know from me? What can I learn right now? Or what can I teach right now? The kind of intellectual exchange in relationships is really featured, or maybe the topics of learning, writing, thinking, communication in relationships. And the other topic that might sneak in there would be, again, some business or creative related exchanges with other people because of Mercury's presence there at the start of the month. Now, that all of those topics are highlighted all month long in relation to Saturn and Pluto in the 6th house. 6th house, traditionally the house of work, sickness, and service. So work, sickness, and service. Why are all of those things grouped together? The 6th house has to do with hard work and hard labor. And when you give that willingly to other people, we call it service. When you're made to do that, we call that suffering and hard work and labor, and even slavery, which was traditionally associated with the 6th house. Also sickness, things that are chronic, that don't end, that you struggle with. That's the 6th house. So here we have a theme potentially of hard work and labor, challenging this dynamic of the mind, of communication, of relationships. And so, the mind may be preoccupied right now with certain levels of challenges or conflicts in relationships, working through negotiations that are difficult, having to work hard mentally to seek resolution. Saturn and Pluto demand that things are real, that they're mature, that they're respectable, and yet it's very hard working. So, is there some need? Do we have some need right now to make something, to write something, to create something? Is our mind dwelling on serious things? Whatever it is, it'll take discipline. It takes hard work. That's the emphasis of Saturn and Pluto in that earthy Capricorn sign in the 6th. Now, this dynamic is all month long. So you're thinking of a month for Leos could be quite serious, or hardworking, or sobering, or mature, but behind it is the desire to think something beautiful, to make something beautiful. The mind is probably dwelling on nice things, but then translating those into practical results, bearing the burden of your thoughts right now, or even working towards compromises, and it's labor heavy to work toward. If you're a singer-songwriter, this is a month where you're crafting something, and it's full on. It's like you're in the studio, you're working the long hours, whatever. But you could think about that, apply that same idea in a lot of different ways. Okay, so that's the first one. Now we switch over to the other major themes of the month, which I already mentioned, which are Scorpio and Taurus across the 4th and 10th house axis, a bunch of planets moving through oppositions to Uranus. So the 4th house, 10th house axis, home, family, roots, property, parents, sometimes specifically the father, your foundation, what you stand on, what props you up in life. And the revolutionary dynamics of Uranus in the 10th house, the desire to seek change, to destabilize, to get out of the status quo, to shake things up, right? So that's happening. Uranus really pressing on that agenda in your career house right now, while you're feeling the tension of all these deep, scorpionic, more emotionally confrontational or deep or intense emotional energies in the area of home, family, roots, foundation, home, parents, etc. So that push-pull is going to be really strong this month as well. There's also this, you could say, overall, a theme throughout the month of the dynamic changes coming through the career that are simultaneously in dialogue with deeper emotional dynamics within the area of home, family, or roots. So that's my little forecast for Leos. Let's move on to our last fire sign, which is Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, rising Sagittarius sun sign, where are these transits taking place? Well, the Libra Capricorn transits are taking place around your 11th and 2nd house axis. That is the axis of friends, allies, groups of people, benefactors, dreams or wishes for the future, especially related to our career, the 11th house. Traditionally, the joy of Jupiter, a place that is associated with the good spirit, the good spirits that accompany us, that aid us, that give us some form of support or abundance in life. That's the 11th house's original meaning. The 2nd house is, of course, again, the house of finances, income, and expenditures. So right now, we're looking at the potential for the building of important relationships, allies, friendships, and generally a pretty healthy and happy looking vibe moving through the 11th house. The sun in its fall right now in your 11th house may indicate, as well as the squares to Saturn and Pluto, that you are revising, reconsidering, or having to end different kinds of social or professional relationships. You're leaving groups if they are not benefiting you, or if they are draining you of resources or money, or if it's not a part of a plan right now to help you thrive in terms of your career, your finances, your investments, maybe something like that. On the other hand, you could also be looking at different forms of creative and maybe even creative or intellectual collaboration. Maybe business collaborations that are fruitful this month. You could also be looking for help from friends due to some kind of constraint or hardship that you're facing financially. You're looking for new jobs. You're seeking out networks of support in one way or another. And that's the 11th house, 2nd house dynamic, especially in relation to things that are going to be 2nd house: resources, material values, money, debts or bills, things like that. So watch for those dynamics to be really strong this month. For better or worse, the connection between friends, social groups, allies, and business or money. Then the other major dynamic of the month is, of course, a series of transits that are moving through Scorpio, opposing Uranus in Taurus. And for those, we're really looking at the 12th house, 6th house axis being illuminated. This is really interesting because, of course, the 12th house is a heavy house. The 12th house is a house that's associated with everything from isolation to abandonment to the dark night of the soul to self-undoing or self-destructiveness. And it's also related to surrender when things are falling apart and we're losing the plot. We've lost control of the ship in one way or another. Not necessarily because we do anything bad, because just life sometimes takes things away. Naturally, there are periods of dissolution. So that 12th house area is highlighted all month long, as it's also hitting the opposition to Uranus in the 6th house. Now, Uranus in the 6th house is a sign at its worst of really shocking or disruptive events coming in that are creating a lot of that either deep inner processing and work, or literal physical work, or even physical or health related hardships. But somehow the interruption of these things, which is such a 6th house thing, by the way, the 6th house traditionally the house of misfortune, accidents, sort of tough things that come up, whether it's a traffic jam you're stuck in, you stub your toe. It's just the kind of house that we're contending with something always. Traditionally was called the joy of Mars for this reason. Now, the emphasis of Uranus in the 6th house is to bring liberation, to bring sudden, rapid forms of enlightenment, but it's bringing them through the times, places, and circumstances, at least this month, when things unexpectedly happen that throw you off, or there's unexpected moments of just being kind of stupid, self-destructive, or there's unexpected moments of losing the plot, losing control of something unexpected and challenging coming up that has the ability to flip your script in some way positively, even if at first it might appear like a real interruption or a headache that you're dealing with. So that's not the most lovely series of transits, but we all have a 6th house axis. We all deal with 6th house, 12th house dynamics all of the time. They're very common. For example, anytime in your day that you have a plan and you think you're in control and something, boom, interrupts that plan, you lose control, even if it's only for 5 minutes. That, in a sense, is a 12th house, 6th house kind of dynamic. So these are all archetypal zones of human experience. So not to be feared, just knowing that this is a month where, hey, if the unexpected curveball comes up, I lose the plot a little bit, I'm not as in control as I'd like to be. Just trust that this is also here for you. Ask that question, what is this doing to set me free in some way? But also, obviously, if you're making any kind of foolish decisions, which sometimes we do in the 12th house, that throw you out of your own peace. You want to pay attention to those and self-correct. So that is what I've got for the fire signs this month. Thank you guys for listening. I hope that you have a very beautiful month of October. Please leave your comments in the comment section. Tell me how it's going. If you're an Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, I'd love to hear your stories this month. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.